All right, I want to welcome everybody to part two of our parent presentation. This is a continuation from last week's awesome presentation with Dr. Huber. We are just going to give it another minute or so to let everybody have the opportunity to log in, and then we will go from there. And as everybody is logging in, this is a presentation that we have primarily for our middle school parents. And, if you are a parent of a middle schooler like I am, it is definitely challenging. And you throw on the extra layer of the pandemic and everything else that our students and we as parents are dealing with. This is a great presentation, a lot of practical applications. Hopefully you can walk away with some great tips heading into the next couple of months here. Just so we are all aware, we are going to be using the chat feature. There will be opportunities to be interactive. Your chat is anonymous so that it won't be seen by everybody, but we as the panelists can see it here. So again, during those points of the presentation, when there are opportunities to contribute, please use the chat feature and we'll go from there. If you have any friends or family or neighbors that weren't able to make it tonight, these presentations are recorded. So if you weren't able to make it the first time around, we do have that link up on our website. And unfortunately, I can't tell you the specific directions, what tab it's under, but it is there on our website. I will be sending this out when I send out the reminders each week. So last week's recording will be available for you as well as this one and next week's as well. So to keep us on schedule here, I just want to do a quick introduction. I'm Dave Sweat. I'm the principal of Lincoln Middle School. And I want to welcome you, and hopefully some of our Emerson families are joining us as well. We do have some members of the Lincoln Admin Guidance Team, so we'll do some quick introductions and then turn it over to Dr. Huber. So Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Condon. I'm one of the social workers at Lincoln.
And I'm Jessica Rillo. I'm the school psychologist intern at Lincoln.
And I'm Tim Gleason. I'm the assistant principal at Lincoln. Dr. Huber, we appreciate you being here tonight, and we look forward to learning a few more things again this evening. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Tim. So nothing's normal. We're doing our best. And tonight we're going to talk about part two, which is control. You can actually impact or have some control on how meaningful this time is together by doing just a couple things. One is to focus. So eliminate any distractions you possibly can and try to avoid multitasking. The Zoom world is infamous for our being distracted and trying to do too many things at once. So for this hour, we're going to do our best to just be present and focus on learning about this need for control that we're all experiencing. The second one is to participate. So I'm going to be asking you things throughout the presentation to write down on a piece of paper and with a pencil or pen, and then some opportunities to engage and type responses into the chat. So just so you know, I can only see the panelists. I can't see you. So the only way that I know that you're there and that you're with me is to put your thoughts into the chat. So I appreciate so much you doing that. And I'm going to be learning from you too along the way tonight. So trauma is a response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms our ability to cope and causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes our sense of self and our ability to feel a full range of emotions and experiences. Tonight, we're going to focus on the helplessness piece of this. So when we go through adverse experiences that are so adverse that they overwhelm our system, it leads to feelings of helplessness. And that really heightens our need for control. Our reality right now is that we are human beings that are experiencing chronic stress. And it's a collective trauma, really. And if you think about it, I mean, we have almost nothing in the literature to draw from to figure out how to navigate a situation like this. The closest thing is really war, what it's like to be in a war, because it's affecting everyone at the same time, and everyone's trying to figure out how to live in a situation they've never been in before. And So all of us, our kids, as well as educators and parents, are all operating at some level of impairment. So think about that for a minute. I put these glasses of milk on here because the glass to the right is pretty much like our normal lives, right? There's always a certain amount of stress. But that glass on the left is like all the time now. We've got this heightened level of stress. And so any little thing that comes along and plops in our milk glass could spill over onto the counter. So last week, I had people put in the chat about where they feel like they're operating right now. So none of us are at 100%. What percent are you operating at? And I'm particularly curious, so if you will, put that in the chat. I'm particularly curious about people who came last week who've been attending to their need for connection. Last week, we talked about how to meet our need for connection. And theoretically, if we're meeting our need for connection better than we were, we should be operating a little closer to our 100%. So think on that and let me know, especially if you were here last week, are you feeling like you're functioning about where you were last week? Lots of people last week were saying 75 to 80% is where they thought they were functioning. Anybody? I'm curious about this. Somebody said a little better than last week. They're at 75 to 80%. You know, I know being with you all and talking about connection last week made me be much more aware of connection with myself, connection with my kids and my colleagues last week. There are 3 core needs that we have all the time, but when we're experiencing chronic stress or trauma, there are these 3. So last week we talked about connection. Hopefully, those of you that didn't get to hear it will take the time to hop back over and listen to the recording. The second one is control. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. And then containment is kind of a long word to capture what we're going to talk about next week, which is feeling a basic sense of safety inside ourselves and our ability to regulate our arousal. So today, yes, somebody's saying the weather hasn't helped much. They're hovering around 70% on their functioning right now. So we're going to talk about control tonight. And specifically, we're going to talk about our need for control and how it shows up in our parenting of a middle schooler and how we can meet our need for control during a pandemic. So let's start off. We are hardwired with this need for control. We all have it. And if you think about pretty much all the popular baby toys that your kids ever had, they all operate in the same way. You push this button and the toy goes, woo, right? And your kid hits that button over and over and over and woo, woo, right? That is their hardwired need for control. They never get tired of it. The rattle on the screen, you know, all they got to do is move their arm and the world communicates to them that what they're doing matters, that they have an impact on their destiny, right? They have an impact on their world. Now, I particularly remember, and if you remember any toys that you want to put in the chat that your kids had that were like this, I particularly remember one where they'd push a button and it would make this horrible moo sound, right? It was this cow, it's supposed to be a cow. It's just a horrible moo sound, right? I was so ready for my child to move past the stage of that moo cow, right? And the thing I want to impress here is that it could be fingernails on a chalkboard and it would still do the same thing, right? It would still be reinforcing and communicate to our child that they're having an impact, they're having control. It doesn't have to be a sweet little tinkly sound like the rattle makes. It can be obnoxious. It's just the process of knowing that I do something and it has an effect, okay? So, you know, we're gonna think about this toy half the night, okay? So if you have a toy in mind, you're in great shape. So our babies, they cry. We as humans do different actions that communicate our needs and the extent to which we can have control and impact our environment. We learn early on that what I do matters, I have an impact, and I can get my needs met. So interestingly, we exaggerate our perceptions of control. So those smiley yellow faces over there, that's most of us, where we greatly overestimate how much control we actually have in our lives. The red frowny face over there, those are people who have learned that they're helpless, that they don't have control, and they become hopeless and depressed. And the green faces in the middle, that's actually the most accurate group of people. So the people who are most accurate about how much control we really do have are dysthymic, meaning they have like a low grade depression. So it's adaptive for us, right? It's adaptive for us that we overestimate how much control we have. But in this pandemic, most of us are moving over into the green or over into the red, because this pandemic is showing us just how little control we have in lots of aspects of our lives. So a middle schooler, sorry, I clicked on the right one. Middle schoolers already have a heightened need for control, okay? Middle school is awesome, my favorite age, but it's complicated, right? They're working on autonomy and competence and belonging and identity, just a packed developmental period. And they have this heightened need for control. And ironically, for all of us parents, it can also be a time where we feel a heightened need for control. Just like the terrible twos, you know, where your kid starts walking, same kind of thing. Your kid is having this need for more control, and you may feel a heightened need for control as well. So it can be a period of a lot of headbutting, because you both legitimately have this need for control. So we're doing a hard thing. We're doing a hard thing as parents of middle schoolers. And so I encourage you, don't be too hard on yourself. Like, this isn't easy. This isn't for the faint of heart. And we've got this mythical expectation that we've been taught, which is you should control your child. Maybe it's you should be able to control your child. Either way, it's a myth. Think about this. When have you ever, maybe I should ask you this first, try to think back to a time when you could control your child. You probably didn't 100% control their conception. You probably didn't control them when they were in the womb. Try to think of a time when you actually controlled your child. It just doesn't exist, right? It's one of the most erroneous and harmful beliefs, I think, that we should be able to, or we should control our children, because we can't make them do anything. We can't make them feel anything, nor can we make our spouses, for that matter. So whenever you start to feel this desire to, or have this thought, like I should be able to control my child, like if I'm a good parent, I want you to hear that Let It Go song, okay? And think of all the snow we have. Let it go, let it go. I'm not going to sing it. And just recognize that you have a legitimate need for control, and so do they. So remember, misbehavior, just like crying, is purposeful. It communicates a need. And the best we can do is identify the need and meet it. You knew this when your baby was an infant. They started to cry. You thought to yourself, okay, do they need a new diaper? They need to eat. They need to sleep. What's going on? It's more complicated, but it's the same thing going on right now in middle school. So most of the time when our kids are doing things that they know are misbehavior, it's to get connection and belonging, and it's to get attention and control, and with help regulating, which is our third night. As it said here on the slide, does it sound familiar? It's a 3-part series. So they're in our interactions with them, we're teaching them that they're worthy of love, and we're teaching them that they're capable of getting their needs met when we meet these needs. So here we go. If we're not able, there we go. If we're not able to control our children, what can we do? Well, we can influence. We can definitely influence. So I'm going to talk about some do's and some don'ts related to influencing. So the first thing to do is to try to change or control things, try to change or control the environment itself. So think about what you already do to try to influence your children's decisions by controlling the environment. If you think of something, go ahead and put it in the chat. And I'll tell you, like, the main one I see for myself is what my kids eat, right? I can't control what my kids eat. I can't force food down their throats, but I can change the environment. If I don't want my kids to regularly consume donuts, I don't buy any donuts, right? So my house is full of healthy foods. And I can even make the bowl of fruit like right in their path when they come from the computer, right? There are all kinds of ways that I can change and control the environment to influence my kids' choices. So that's the first one. I didn't see anybody put a thing in there in the chat. Can you think of things that you do to influence decisions that you make to influence your children's choices? All right. Somebody said I can't control the level of their emotions, but I can control my level of emotions, my reactions, right? That's beautiful. So you bring yourself down a few notches. Your kids are influenced to bring themselves down a few notches. You can sign them up for activities that they may enjoy, right? Or even sign up together for activities they may enjoy. Their bedtime and their screen time, some of the ways that you can shape. I've known people who want their kids to be sort of the place where other kids come to hang out. They would like other kids to come to their child's house versus the other way around. So they put a lot of money in a great gaming system, stuff like that, so that the kids want to come to their house. So lots of ways that we can impact. Somebody said limiting the internet or the apps. So some people just have their internet turn off at a certain time every night, right? And that influences whether or not their child's going to choose to go to bed and sleep early and so on. So thank you for participating. That makes it much more fun. So the next thing is to focus on increasing what you want versus decreasing what you don't want, okay? So what you attend to and spend time on shows what's important to you, and we tend to get more of what we focus on, For me, when I think about something like homework completion or something like that, what I want to do is focus on the homework completion and increasing that rather than trying to get rid of the other behaviors that I don't want, right? Because what can happen is I might get my child to, stay off their phone, but then they just do something else, right? So it's much more efficient to focus on the thing that I'm trying to encourage them to do. Otherwise, I'm just playing whack-a-mole with all the things I don't want them to do. And this plays out in a lot of different ways. The other thing to remember is that your middle schooler, your teen, is doing a lot of things, increasingly more all the time, that are right and that are things that you want them to do. It's just that you expect it now. You think about how you handled toilet training, right? It was big hooray every time they went in the potty. Well, you don't do that anymore. And there are lots and lots of things like that we don't celebrate our kids doing because we just expect it now. So one of the things that you can do to influence your children to do the things that you want them to do is to often have a big positive reaction to what they did, right? They unloaded the dishwasher, even though it was, the 30th time that they've unloaded the dishwasher, and you haven't said anything for 30 times. Celebrate, tell them how awesome it is, and what a great contribution it is to the family that you can count on them to do the dishwasher. So often have a big positive reaction to something that they're doing that you're happy about. I want to talk a little bit about this, about slot machines. So slot machines are programmed, so I'm told, to be about a 5-to-1 ratio. So they don't pay off every time. They only pay off every so often. But people love them, right? They get hooked on slot machines because of the ratio that they're set up at. And think about how hard it is to be consistent in our lives, right? We're not going to throw a big celebration and jump up and down every time they unload the dishwasher, right? It's just too hard to try to do something every time. So the beautiful thing is, if slot machines paid off every single time, people wouldn't play them very much, right? They would just play them once and then go do something else. So the same goes for shaping the behaviors that you want to see. Remember that baby toy? Imagine that moo toy is faulty. So it only goes off every so often, right? So my child pushes the button. Sometimes they get a moo and sometimes they don't. What do you do if you have a toy that only works every once in a while? You start pounding on the button, right? You start pounding on the button until you get the moo sound. This is exactly a behavioral principle that will work in our favor if we're focusing on the things that we want and celebrating the things that we want. That is a great transition to the second slide, which is the don'ts, okay? What we don't want to do is occasionally have a big reaction to something that we don't want to see. All right, this is the recipe for disaster. So we don't want to focus on, oops, I think I have a mistake in my slide here. We don't want to focus on decreasing things we don't want, right? That's just a disaster because, again, just like with the dishwasher, we can't possibly celebrate in a big way every single time to show that impact. So in this case, we do not want to occasionally give a big negative reaction when the kid is doing something, our child is doing something that we do not want to see. That's our disaster. And I put a reminder, we don't want to be trying to change or control our child, right? It just doesn't feel good and it doesn't work, right? We want to avoid ways in which we're sending the message that you should be different than you are, right? It just doesn't feel good and it doesn't work, no matter how many times you say it. So this is the don't page. And I have an example. I'm doing this right now, even though I know better. So I have a child who is kind of a whirling dervish, and everywhere he goes, he just leaves a trail of mess. He just leaves a trail of mess everywhere he goes. And I come out of my workspace, I see the trail of mess. Sometimes I just don't do anything. Sometimes I ignore it, right? And I just kind of let it pile up. And then somebody says, we all have a whirling dervish. So I come out, I see the trail of mess. Sometimes I don't do anything, I just ignore it. Other times, my need for control, I clean the mess up, right? I follow along behind and I just clean the mess up. And then every once in a while, I'll be like, seriously, this is a disaster. Why do you make this big mess, right? It's the exact wrong thing to do. It's the exact wrong thing to do. I illustrate this because it's, even though I know to do it, my own need for control, right? When I scold my son and then he picks up all the mess, guess what happens? I get my own little dopamine burst, right? That worked. I pushed the button and it went moo, right? So I'm being reinforced. My need for control is being reinforced, which is why I keep doing it, even though it doesn't help with my child's messiness. The other thing is, if I go back to the do slide and I think about how many things my kid does actually put away, right? He does clean up after himself a lot, but it's just never 100%, right? There's always something, and then it piles up over time. So if I follow my own advice here, I'm going to focus on what he does do, and every once in a while, provide a big positive reaction, and probably more often than not, celebrate the things that he does clean up after himself. So now we come to the pandemic. Okay, this first quote is from my one of my teens. The other day, she said to me, this pandemic has taught us how fragile we are. I'm like, isn't that the truth? And she may have been, thinking about, we can get sick, right? We can get sick easily and stuff like that. But I think she might have been talking about this lack of self-efficacy, this powerlessness that we've been feeling in the face of the pandemic. Just as soon as we think, wow, we got a vaccine coming. Now we've also got all these new strains and nobody's quite sure. And, it's just been one thing after another that has reminded us that we don't have as much control as we've been trying to convince ourselves that we have. And a lot of people are thinking thoughts like nothing I do matters, resistance is futile. That's for the Star Trek fans. So here we are. We have this need for control and we're in the middle of a pandemic. What can we do? So the first thing that we can do is get information. If we get information and we can anticipate or know what to expect, guess what we can do? We can help control our environment. We can be prepared. You think about all the communication coming home from the school. At every turn, if District 64 is like my kids' school, we're getting emails, tons of information, right? The school is trying so hard to give us as much information as possible so we can prepare and we can be ready for everything that's coming down the pipeline that we have no control over. One of the things that I think has been so powerful is all these districts that are giving families choices because of this struggle. There's so much out of our control right now. So think about how you're already doing this. How are there ways, other than this example that I just gave you, that you are getting information so you know what to expect and preparing yourself in order to meet your need for control? Can you think about how and where and when you're doing this? I think we're doing it intuitively, trying to prepare ourselves so we can feel and have more control. Lots of reading and listening to the news. Yeah. And trying to understand what the dynamics of this virus are, right? I know a lot of people have felt a huge extra need for control through the recent political processes that have been going on, right? And so trying to get to understand so much about the way the law works and the way politics work. For older kids, checking into travel restrictions and planning to travel to them. So, traveling is always stressful, but under these conditions, what do you need to know to make yourself ready and to have control over your trip and feel safe? Having the option to choose remote learning allowed this family to have some control. Yeah, somebody said, do parents find it helpful or harmful to let their kids consume lots of COVID news, right? I think many parents are, I don't want to say cherry picking, but right, getting the information and then selecting the things that they share with their kids, because it can be really overwhelming. I don't want to go into that. I just got into an argument with somebody about COVID yesterday, just snuck into my consciousness. So just talking with other people. And I know, like, I've had both my vaccinations, right? And so lots of people were asking me, what was it like? What was the vaccination like? How long did that put you down and things like that? Because they're wanting to be able to prepare, right? Move around their schedule and have control over it. So the next thing is in situations where it feels like we have very little control, to ask ourselves, what aspects of it do we actually have control over? And these things may feel small, like physical, sensory, comfort things, food, water, space, noise level, temperature. But these things under normal circumstances have been shown to be connected with our stress levels. So people, when it's hot outside or cold outside, when they're uncomfortable physically, their bodies just show more signs of stress, and emotionally they show more signs of stress. So if we can control some of these things, that's going to meet this need for us. I was thinking about, for me, when I started in the pandemic, I literally sat on a couch with a laptop on my lap for the first like 8 months, right? Until I finally decided, you know what? I can do something to make this work better for me. I have the capacity to purchase a desk and set up an office space, right? And I got myself more than one monitor. And it's been lovely. It's been lovely. But I had to identify what change is going to make me feel a sense of control or mastery over this situation that I'm in. Somebody says, yeah, the pandemic forces us to find mini wins for all sorts of things, mini as in MINI, little wins that we can implement. Think about what change that you can make or have made that has felt empowering or satisfying and made your life easier during this time. I'd love to see some of the things in the chat. Somebody said, one of the things that's really helped her is to find silver linings, like working out in the morning, using that what used to be commuting time to exercise, more outdoor walks, someone said. What are some things that you're doing to have a sense of actually having control? I was thinking of another one for me. Oh, a big one for me is how I'm handling food. You know, my food routine is completely different than when I used to be going to the office. And so I've been making food on the weekends. And then I don't really have to think about food. I just have these things boxed up to eat. And that's working for me, as having some control over my world. Somebody said dining out safely, meeting with friends safely. When it was warmer, we could, sit at a distance in the yard, those kinds of things. Somebody else said, with a lot of the activities being canceled, really finding time with family and choosing to do things with our kids that we might not have otherwise done. So another thing we can do for ourselves, but also for our kids, are to provide opportunities for choice. And we alluded to some of those earlier. Really, there are many opportunities for choice if we're thinking about just allowing our kids to choose when and where or how something that needs to be done gets done. And giving them that latitude. When they were little, you might say, oh, do you want to wear your Superman pajamas or your Batman pajamas, right? And we would give them the choice of which pajamas they wanted to wear, because they're getting in their pajamas, right? And in this pandemic, definitely having as much opportunity for choice as we can gives us a sense of that need being met. Creating opportunities for our kids to contribute, to be useful, to know that their actions are impacting others, and to feel efficacious. So can you think of ways that your kids are able to contribute in some way and know that what they're doing matters? I was thinking about mask making. A lot of families made masks for a while, things like that, ways in which I'm contributing to the greater good. I know there are lots of ways we even talked about last week where kids can contribute to their family, right? Oh, love it. Shoveling the neighbor's drive, making small charity contributions. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so and please feel free to put more of those in the chat if you like. So just to review, we've got a number of things that we can do to feel, to have more control. One is to get information and to prepare ourselves for what's coming, what we anticipate. Looking for those mini wins, changes that we can make that will make our lives easier, that will make us more comfortable in one of these ways. I know I have a little lap heating blanket that I've been using, and that one small change makes me feel so much more in control when I'm hearing the wind whistling through my window here. Providing opportunities for choice and identifying opportunities for choice for ourselves. We're doing a lot of things that we're not really happy about right now. And so we can choose the order that we're doing them. We can choose where we sit when we do them, all kinds of ways that we can influence and our children can influence. And then looking for opportunities to contribute, impact, do something where you know that your presence in the world matters, that you're bringing about good. All right, now there are situations where it's really a struggle to figure out what you can control. And in those cases, one thing we can do is change what we're thinking. So change our perspective. I'm wondering how many of you have heard of Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl was is kind of a famous Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist who was in a concentration camp. And being the person that he was, he studied the way he and the other people in the concentration camp were coping with these situations where literally there was virtually nothing in their control. And he has this famous quote here: "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." So he watched people find meaning in the most horrible of situations by the way they thought about the circumstances they were then in. So I'm going to put up a slide here and I'd like you to draw this out on your piece of paper. So you're going to start on the left with some sort of situation. Then at the top, the thoughts that you have about it. Then the feelings, what you feel in your body, and the actions that you take. So this is based loosely on cognitive behavioral principles. I do this with many, many middle schoolers, right? To begin to see how what's going on outside of them is connected to what's going on inside of them, and how what they do then can affect the next situation, right? So there's a final out arrow after we get to actions that goes back up to the situation. And when I'm looking at this and examining this with kids, there's almost no scenario that we draw out, even if it's like a horrible situation, like, the teacher accused me of doing something that I didn't do, right? And we go all the way around. We figure out their thoughts, their feelings, their body, the sensations, and their actions. And they feel like, it's just helpless. This is so unfair. Nothing I do matters. And I ask them, is there anything that you could have done here in this actions situation that would have made the situation worse? Well, almost always they can say, well, yeah, I could have done this, that, and the other, right? So it's a moment for me to be able to praise them for doing what they did, because it could have been worse, but also to recognize that even in these situations where they feel like they've had no control, they actually made choices and they did control the situation from not being worse than it was. Now, that's one way that I use this. Oops, sorry, okay. Sorry, I got to get my slides going here. So that's one way that I use this. Has everybody, nod if you've got it written down, everybody that I can see. Okay, great. So I reorganized my slides, I apologize. So here's what I call sketch and reflect, okay? So what I'm gonna do with you is walk you through a scenario that is literally happening in my life right now. But you can do one on your own, or you can watch me do one and then do it on your own, okay? So this is a powerful tool that you can use in your life and you can use with your kids that can help you with your need for control, both in actually changing things, but also changing how you think about the control that you have. So identify one element. So usually you identify the situation first. For me, I usually do the feelings second. So I go, I write down the situation that happened. I can usually identify my feelings more easily than my thoughts, and most kids can too. So what happened? What were my feelings about it? Maybe even what did I notice in my body about it? But then go back. What are the thoughts that you're having? What are the thoughts that you're having in this situation that make these feelings make sense? Okay. Once you get through the whole circle, you can step back and just say, you know, like, what do I observe here? What do we see when we're looking at this? And guess what? It always makes sense. It always makes sense that you feel the way you do when you're thinking what you're thinking in response to this, this thing. And that feels good, right? Because a lot of times when we're feeling strong emotions, we feel out of control. And it doesn't feel good, all right? So, oh, okay, this makes sense. I see what's going on here. And then we can start experimenting with it. One of the main ways is to insert a new thought in there and notice how it changes the other elements, okay? And then I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, crafting and displaying a reminder affirmation. So here's the situation that I'm in right now. My teenager, who has 3 risk factors, a very compromised immune system, wants to go to in-person band. The school sent out the form, he filled it out and sent it back saying he's going to do in-person band. I'm feeling panicky, fiercely protective, and angry, okay? The thoughts that my stomach is in knots. I got a knot in my throat. I want to cry. My thoughts are, the stakes are too high. If he gets COVID, he'll die, and I can't handle it if he dies. Okay? Very extreme. What do I want to do? I want to forbid it. I want to stoke his fears, and I want to try to talk him out of it. All right? That's what I want to do. So we take a step back, because that's some pretty strong emotions, right? That's one of the first things I notice when I look at the my wheel, is that I'm having very strong emotions. I might even rate my emotions and say, wow, you know, this is up close to a 10, Brenda, you know, these feelings are quite strong. So I look at my thoughts and I say, well, of course you're going to feel panically and protective and angry if you're thinking he's going to die, right? That's the highest stakes there is. So think with me here about what I might be able to say to myself about the situation that might change either the feelings that I have or the intensity of the feelings that I have, right? So let's think about that. Give me some advice. What might I say to myself besides, if he gets COVID, he'll die and I can't handle if he dies? What ideas do you have? Okay, somebody says, back to our clues, get some information so you can be prepared, right? That's one way to meet your need for control, is get some information about how they're setting up the band room, what are all the scenarios and so on. So I might start having a little bit different thought, right? Any other ideas besides getting more information? talk directly with the band director about my concerns. Okay. If the director hears me out and can give me some more reassurance or something like that, I might feel, number one, like what I'm doing is having an impact, right? I can ask my child himself how he will keep himself safe, right? And enlist my child in the decision. This is a tough one, isn't it? Okay. Share my feelings with my child, right? Express my feelings. Good. Other suggestions? I could think about the emotional benefits for my child. I could look at it at a completely different way. So what if I said something like, before I do that, what if I just said, there's a chance he could get COVID, right? Even if I just said, there's a chance he could get COVID, right? Or that changes from, if he gets COVID, he'll die, right? If I just simply bring down what I'm saying to myself, the intensity of what I'm saying to myself, I'm going to reduce the intensity of my feelings. So if I say to myself, well, there's a such and such % chance that he could get COVID. And there's a such and such chance if he got COVID that he could have long-term impact from it or whatever. Even if I just start putting some facts in there, I'm going to somewhat reduce my intensity of my feelings, my sensations. I'm going to be able to think more clearly and so on. And getting all the information and preparing myself is helpful. What I did find out is that, they're going to have like little masks for the instruments and all this kind of thing. And they've figured out the HVAC system, and they're going to be swapping out rooms, and the HVAC will have time to circulate, etc. You guys are probably tackling all these things too. So there might be a number of things that I could say differently to myself to decrease how strongly I'm reacting to this. And then I might be in a position to think about my child's emotional needs or share my feelings with my child, talk about it. Some other things might be, once I start thinking more clearly, I might be able to come up with some different responses, some different behaviors that could still meet my need without being kind of sabotaging my own child's, need for control too. So for example, I could say something like, well, what if you just wait a little longer until they're meeting outdoors, right? Because as soon as it's warm, they'll be doing it outdoors. Or what if we can get them a vaccine? So I start thinking more clearly about other ways I might be able to have control. My child plays both percussion and oboe. So I could say, you know what, I'm okay with you going back as long as you're just doing percussion. And you'll be able to double mask and all of that. So once I can work with my thoughts, I can deal with my feelings, and I can meet my need for control in sort of by changing my thoughts, I can meet my need for control to a certain extent. Okay, so last piece is talking about affirmations. So when I get done with this, I want to have something that I can say to myself that I can make myself feel better. Okay, I can meet my need for control. So if I think of affirmations like I'm making a difference, what I do matters, I'm a powerful force for good, I can keep myself and my family safe. You guys can generate these, right? You can generate these affirmations. And then what I suggest you do is just close your eyes and think the affirmation and notice what happens in your body. That's how you can tell what's the affirmation for you. So I know when I say I can keep myself and my family safe, that resonates with my body. It's like, yes, that's what I need to hear. That's what I need to hear, is I can keep myself and my family safe. Or, what I do matters, right? So, I mean, think about, we started with baby toys. And here we are. It's like I need to hear the very thing that I heard when I pushed the Moo toy as a youngster. So in this time where it's so difficult, come up with your own affirmation. What do you need to hear yourself say to yourself, and post it somewhere so that you can affirm your need for control, meet your need for control in these very abnormal times. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for contributing in the chat and for being with us here tonight.
Awesome. And once again, Dr. Huber, I want to thank you again for providing us some understanding and some context. I know so many of us are reacting and emoting during everything that's been hitting us for the last year or so. So to get some understanding on why we're feeling that way and some things that we can take away to be able to better handle this, not only for ourselves, but for our children and our students. Really appreciate it. Again, if you're joining us, awesome. Spread the word, pass it on to your neighbors and to your friends in the community that this presentation will be recorded and available next week, as was last week's. We do have one more part to the 3-part series that's coming up next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. We hope that you'll join us. But again, on behalf of the Lincoln Admin Guidance Team, those who are here on the panel and those who are also, I think, listening at home as well, we want to thank you for your partnership with us and being a useful and beneficial resource for all of us here. So thank you. And thank you, parents, for being a part of this tonight. We will see you next week.